The chandeliers of the Grand Astoria Hotel dripped light like frozen diamonds, casting a golden, forgiving glow upon the city's elite. From her vantage point near the stage, Eleanor Vance watched the spectacle unfold. It was her gala, a celebration of the 10th anniversary of Vance Innovations, the empire she had built from the ashes of her grief. She wore a gown the color of midnight, severe and elegant, a perfect mirror of the woman she had become, controlled, impeccable, unbreakable. But beneath the silk and the carefully constructed smile, a decade-old wound remained stubbornly raw. Every clink of champagne glasses sounded like the tolling of a bell, marking another year without him. Liam. His name was a ghost on her lips, a phantom ache in her heart. They had been inseparable, two halves of a brilliant, ambitious whole. He was the visionary, the dreamer. She was the strategist, the executor. Together, they were going to change the world. Then came the storm, the splintered wreckage of his boat, the hollow words of the Coast Guard. No survivors. She had refused to believe it. For 2 years, she had poured their fortune into a search that spanned coastlines and crossed oceans, chasing down every crackpot theory and false sighting. But eventually, even her hope had been ground down to dust. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She built Vance Innovations into a titan of industry, a monument to the man she had lost, each success a bitter tribute. Ms. Vance. Her assistant, Marcus, appeared at her elbow, his expression a familiar blend of deference and concern. Senator Caldwell is asking for a moment. Eleanor gave a slight, dismissive wave of her hand. Tell him I'll be with him shortly, Marcus. Just give me a minute. Marcus nodded, understanding. He was one of the few who knew the story behind the steal. He had been there from the beginning. He watched as she scanned the crowd, her gaze distant as if searching for a face she knew she would never find. It was a ritual he witnessed at every public event. The room was a sea of tailored suits and designer dresses, of practiced smiles and predatory ambition. It was her world now, but it had never truly been her home. Her home had vanished in the cold, grey waters of the Atlantic. The sudden commotion at the main entrance was a welcome distraction, a sharp note in the otherwise monotonous symphony of wealth. Eleanor's brow furrowed in annoyance. She had paid for the best security, for seamless perfection. Such a disruption was unacceptable. He clutched the worn manila folder to his chest as if it were a shield. His name was Daniel, or at least that's what they had called him for the past 8 years. The life before that was a blank. A black void torn open by a head injury the doctors could never fully explain. He had washed ashore with nothing but the clothes on his back and a crescent-shaped scar above his right eyebrow. A kind fisherman's family had taken him in, and he had pieced together a new existence, a quiet life of manual labor and small joys. The greatest of those joys, the very center of his universe, was his daughter, Lily. Lily was 6 years old, with her mother's bright eyes and a laugh that could make dandelions sprout from concrete. But her laughter had grown quiet lately, replaced by a persistent rattling cough. The local clinic had given him a diagnosis that felt like a death sentence, a rare respiratory disorder. The treatment was experimental, astronomically expensive, and available at only a handful of specialized hospitals. He had sold his truck, his tools, everything of value. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Desperation had led him here, to the gleaming fortress of the Grand Astoria. He'd read about Eleanor Vance in a discarded newspaper. A tech billionaire, but also a philanthropist who had funded children's hospital wings. He had no appointment, no invitation, just a desperate, foolish hope that if he could speak to her, show her Lily's medical records and the crayon drawing of their family, just the two of them, she might listen. He was a father, and a father's love was a force more powerful than velvet ropes or social decorum. He saw the entrance, a gilded archway guarded by men in sharp black suits. He took a deep breath, the sterile, perfumed air of the lobby a stark contrast to the scent of antiseptic that clung to his clothes. He approached the velvet rope, his heart hammering against his ribs. A thick-necked guard with a name tag that read, Peterson, stepped forward, blocking his path with a meaty arm. "Can I help you, sir?" The sir was an insult, dripping with condescension. "I need to see Miss Vance," Daniel said, his voice hoarse. "It's an emergency." It's about my daughter. Peterson's eyes flicked over Daniel's worn jacket, his scuffed work boots, the desperation etched into his face. He saw a problem, not a person. This is a private event. You're not on the list. Please, just for 2 minutes, Daniel begged, holding out the folder. If she could just see these. You need to leave, Peterson said, his voice hardening. Now. You don't understand. She's sick. My little girl is sick. Panic began to fray the edges of his control. He made a move to duck under the rope. It was a clumsy, desperate lunge, born of fear and love. It was all the excuse Peterson needed. He grabbed Daniel by the shoulder, spinning him around. I said, get out. No, please. The shove was brutally efficient. Daniel stumbled backward, his worn boots finding no purchase on the polished marble floor. He went down hard, his head cracking against the ground with a sickening thud. The manila folder flew from his grasp, its contents scattering across the pristine floor. Medical charts, a worn teddy bear with one button eye, and a child's drawing in vibrant, hopeful crayon. Eleanor saw it all. The initial argument, the man's desperate plea, the guard's aggressive posture. Her first reaction was a cold flash of fury at the incompetence of her security detail. This was a public relations disaster waiting to happen. She started moving towards the entrance, Marcus a step behind her, ready to manage the fallout. Get that man out of here, discreetly, she commanded, her voice low and sharp. But then he fell, and as he lay on the floor, dazed, the harsh overhead lights caught the side of his face. Eleanor stopped dead. The world around her, the music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, dissolved into a silent, roaring vacuum. Her gaze was locked on a small, pale mark just above the man's right eyebrow, a crescent-shaped scar. The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. A clumsy teenage Liam falling off a ladder while trying to hang a string of lights for her 17th birthday party. The trip to the emergency room, her hand clutching his, the doctor stitching up the cut. He'd always joked that she'd marked him for life. It couldn't be. It was a trick of the light, a phantom created by a decade of longing. This man was thinner, his face weathered by hardship, his eyes filled with a lost, haunted look she didn't recognize. His hair was shorter, flecked with grey at the temples. He was a stranger. But the scar was Liam's. As if in a dream, she saw the guard, Peterson, lean down and grab the man's arm, trying to haul him to his feet. On your feet. You're done. Something inside Eleanor Vance, something that had been frozen for 10 years, snapped. The carefully constructed dam of control, of grief, of ice-cold professionalism shattered into a million pieces. A primal scream built in her chest, clawing its way up her throat. The CEO of Vance Innovations vanished, and in her place was a wife who had just watched a stranger lay hands on her resurrected husband. She moved with a speed that shocked everyone, including herself. She shoved past a bewildered senator and a startled socialite, her midnight gown flowing behind her like a storm cloud. Marcus called her name, but she didn't hear him. The only sound in her world was the frantic, desperate pounding of her own heart. Peterson was trying to drag the dazed man towards a side door when he felt a vice-like grip on his collar, yanking him backward. He turned, ready to confront another intruder, and found himself face to face with Eleanor Vance. Her eyes, usually a calm, calculating grey, were blazing with a terrifying, incandescent fury. Before he could utter a word, her hand shot out and snatched the front of his throat. Her grip was shockingly strong, her manicured nails digging into his skin. The air was squeezed from his lungs. What? She hissed, her voice a low, guttural growl that was utterly alien to everyone who knew her. Have you done? The entire ballroom fell silent. All eyes were on the scene at the entrance, the powerful, untouchable Eleanor Vance, with her hand around her own security guard's throat, standing over the body of a fallen, anonymous man. Get your filthy hands off of him, she snarled, shoving Peterson away with a strength born of pure adrenaline. The guard stumbled back, gasping for air, his face a mask of shock and terror. Eleanor dropped to her knees on the cold marble, oblivious to her expensive gown, to the hundreds of staring eyes, to the flashing cameras of the few reporters in the room. Her hands hovered over the man's face, trembling. She gently brushed the hair from his forehead, her fingers tracing the familiar, impossible shape of the scar. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, streamed down her face, carving clean paths through her makeup. "Liam," she whispered, the name a fragile, broken thing. "Liam. It's me. It's Ellie." The man on the floor stared up at her, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He saw a beautiful, weeping stranger in a black dress. He didn't see his wife. He didn't know the name she had called him. He only knew pain, confusion, and a desperate, all-consuming need to get back to his daughter. The world swam back into focus for Daniel in disjointed fragments. The cold of the marble floor, the throbbing pain at the back of his head, and the face of a woman hovering over him, her expression a maelstrom of emotions he couldn't begin to decipher. She was calling him Liam. The name meant nothing to him. It was a sound, a foreign word. He tried to sit up, a groan escaping his lips. Who are you?" he managed, his voice raspy. The question struck Eleanor harder than any physical blow. The hope that had ignited so fiercely in her chest moments before was doused in ice water. She saw no recognition in his eyes, only the wary fear of a cornered animal. You don't know me?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Liam, look at me. It's Ellie. You're Ellie." He shook his head slowly, the movement sending a fresh wave of pain through his skull. "My name is Daniel. I don't know any Liam." The chaos erupted around them. Marcus was finally at her side, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Eleanor, we need to move. The press is having a field day. We need to get you both out of sight." He and another, more level-headed guard were helping Daniel to his feet, while a third escorted the still-stunned Peterson away. Guests were murmuring, their phones held up to capture the unprecedented drama. Eleanor felt numb, her mind reeling. He was alive. Liam was alive. But he was also gone, erased, replaced by this stranger named Daniel, who looked at her with empty eyes. She allowed Marcus to guide her, her gaze never leaving the man's face. She watched as he instinctively bent down, despite his obvious pain, to gather the scattered contents of his folder. His hands trembled as he picked up the child's drawing. A young waitress named Sarah, who had been serving drinks nearby, saw his struggle. Pity overriding her fear of the unfolding drama, she knelt down to help him. She handed him the worn teddy bear and the last of the medical papers. "Here you go, sir," she whispered kindly. Daniel clutched the items to his chest, his knuckles white. "Lily," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "I have to get to Lily." Eleanor's head snapped up. "Lily? Who is Lily?" "My daughter," he said, his voice thick with a protective desperation that Eleanor knew all too well. It was the sound of a parent's fear. "She's sick. That's why I came. I needed your help." The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture that was both miraculous and heartbreaking. He had a daughter. He had a new life, a life without her. "Take him to the penthouse suite," Eleanor commanded Marcus, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual authority. "Get Dr. Evans on the phone. Tell him I need him at the Astoria, now. And find out where this Lily is. I want a full medical team dispatched to her location immediately." Marcus nodded, already speaking into his phone as he guided the bewildered Daniel towards a private elevator. Eleanor followed, walking as if in a trance. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing them away from the prying eyes of the world, she was left alone with the man she had mourned for a decade. He stood hunched in the corner, clutching his daughter's drawing, looking at her not with love, but with suspicion and fear. The joy of finding him was being rapidly consumed by the terrifying mystery of who he had become. The penthouse suite was an oasis of silent luxury, a world away from the clamor of the ballroom. Daniel sat stiffly on the edge of a plush velvet couch, looking utterly out of place amidst the opulent decor. He had refused any medical attention for himself, his focus solely on his daughter. He had given Marcus the address of the small rented room where a neighbor was watching Lily, his words clipped and anxious. Eleanor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glittering cityscape, though she saw none of it. Her reflection was a stranger, a disheveled woman in a ruined gown, her face streaked with tears. She had found her husband, only to lose him all over again in the space of a single breath. Dr. Evans arrived, a trusted family friend and one of the city's top neurologists. After a brief, gentle examination, he drew Eleanor aside. "The scar is old, but the contusion from the fall is fresh," he said in a low voice. "But based on what you've told me, Eleanor, his reaction is consistent with severe dissociative amnesia, a total loss of autobiographical memory. Something traumatic must have happened to him, something that caused him to forget everything, including his own identity." "The boating accident," Eleanor whispered, the words tasting like ash. "They said the boat was torn apart. He must have suffered a major head injury." "It's possible," Dr. Evans conceded, "and over time, if he built a new life, a new identity, those new memories would have solidified. To him, Daniel is who he is. Liam is a name for a man he's never met. Can it be fixed? Can you bring him back?" The desperation in her voice was palpable. Dr. Evans sighed, his expression grim. "Amnesia like this is unpredictable. Sometimes a familiar sight, a sound, a smell can trigger a cascade of returning memories. Other times, the wall is absolute. Pushing him too hard could be detrimental, causing more psychological harm." Just then, Marcus entered the room, his face pale. "Eleanor, the team is with the girl, Lily. They're transporting her to Vance Memorial. She's in critical condition. The local clinic misdiagnosed the severity. She needs the treatment you've been funding." Daniel overheard and shot to his feet. "What? Is she okay? I need to go to her." "She will get the best care in the world," Eleanor said, turning to him. Her voice was soft, but laced with an iron resolve. "I give you my word. We will save her." He stared at her, his fear warring with a flicker of gratitude. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Eleanor took a step closer, her heart aching with the chasm between them. "Because, a long time ago, the man I loved told me that our purpose was to use what we had to help those who had nothing. You don't remember him, but I do." The days that followed were a blur of sterile white corridors and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Lily was fighting, and Eleanor poured every resource at her disposal into that fight. Daniel was a ghost haunting the ICU waiting room, his face etched with a fear that was agonizingly familiar to Eleanor. She had worn that same expression for 2 years. But while her public-facing team managed the media circus, her real work happened in the shadows. The cold fury that had ignited at the gala had now been honed into a weapon. "It was Julian Croft," Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion. They were in a sterile, windowless room deep in the Vance Tower, a command center humming with the quiet power of servers. The walls were covered not with financial records, but with a web of surveillance data. A spiderweb of connections 10 years in the making. "He always hated Liam, hated his talent, hated that you chose him. Envy is a patient poison." "Hate is a motive, Marcus. I need a confession," Eleanor said, her eyes never leaving the live, high-definition feed of Julian Croft laughing at a restaurant. "A man without a care in the world." "We have more than that," Marcus replied, a thin, predatory smile touching his lips. "You see, Eleanor, the gala was never just a gala. It was the final move in a chess game I've been playing for 9 years. I've had Croft under surveillance ever since his clumsy attempt to acquire Liam's core patents after the accident. His arrogance made him predictable. I knew he couldn't resist the chance to gloat on the 10th anniversary of his victory." Eleanor turned from the screen, a flicker of cold understanding in her eyes. "The waitress, Sarah. She was too calm." "My niece," Marcus confirmed, "a promising cybersecurity student. Liam was her mentor. He saw her potential when no one else did, paid for her first coding camp. She would have done anything for him. For you. Her job was to get close to his known associates, Alistair Finch and Ben Carter. The audio device in her serving tray was the least of it. She was mapping their phones, their digital footprints. The accidental reappearance of Liam. That was a variable we never anticipated, but a very welcome one. It made them panic." He tapped a tablet, and a series of files opened, audio of the panicked, whispering voices of Finch and Carter. A phone call, Julian Croft's voice, sharp and furious. "He's alive? Handle it. Get him out of there before anyone else sees. I don't care how. Make him disappear again, for good this time." The air in the room grew 10 degrees colder. Peterson, the guard, Eleanor stated. A gambling addict with debts to a bookie owned by a subsidiary of a company owned by Finch, Marcus said without missing a beat. He was a pre-identified weak point. A text message and a wire transfer were all it took. They paid him to create a scene and drag Daniel out a back exit. The fall was their sloppy mistake, a beautiful, unscripted error. "Where are the associates?" Eleanor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Having a very frank discussion with Gabriella, my head of security," Marcus said. On a secondary monitor, a live feed showed two terrified men in a stark room, facing a calm, imposing woman. They have provided notarized videotaped confessions detailing the events of 10 years ago. The sabotaged engine, the falsified weather report they fed to a contact at the meteorological office, the payment from a shell corporation that traces directly back to Croft's personal accounts. We have everything. Eleanor stood, a predator that had finally scented blood. He's holding a press conference tomorrow, unveiling his new flagship building. He's going to be on top of the world. I want to be there. I thought you might, Marcus said, handing her a press pass. Front row. And Gabriella's team has already replaced the event's AV crew. We have full control of every screen and every speaker. The stage is yours, Eleanor. The next day, Julian Croft stood on a dais in the sun-drenched plaza before his new tower, a monument of glass and steel piercing the sky. He was bathed in the adulation of the press, the personification of triumph. He radiated a smugness so profound it was practically an atmospheric condition. "This tower," he boomed, his voice resonating with practiced charisma, "is not just a building. It's a symbol of vision, of relentless drive. A testament to the fact that in this city, the boldest vision always wins." He was halfway through his self-congratulatory speech when he saw her, Eleanor Vance, standing at the back of the press corps, a spectre in a severe charcoal suit. Their eyes met across the crowded plaza. He gave her a slow, dismissive smirk, a silent taunt that dripped with condescension. "I won. You lost. This is my world now." She didn't react. Her face was a mask of cold serenity. She simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to a man who looked like a cameraman, but was, in fact, Marcus. The signal was sent. The massive state-of-the-art screen behind Croft, which had been displaying architectural renderings, suddenly flickered. It went black. Croft paused, an annoyed frown creasing his brow. "A little technical difficulty, it seems," he chuckled, trying to play it off. "Even the best tech has its moments." Then the plaza's state-of-the-art sound system crackled. A single sound echoed across the stone, amplified to an impossible volume, the terrified gasp of a man fighting for breath. It was followed by the sound of splintering wood and rushing water. It was a soundscape of death, Liam's death. The crowd murmured, confused. Croft's smile tightened. The screen behind him lit up, not with a logo, but with the terrified, sweat-sheened face of Alistair Finch. His voice, shaking and pathetic, filled the plaza as he signed a confession. The screen split to show Ben Carter, weeping, corroborating every word of the plot to sabotage Liam's boat. Then came the bank transfers, highlighted in damning red, flowing from Croft's shell company to the accounts of his co-conspirators. The date stamp on the final payment was from the morning after the accident. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd, growing into a wave of shocked noise. Croft's face, projected 20 feet high on a secondary screen he hadn't even noticed was active, went from smug to confused to bone-white with terror. Before he could speak, the sound system played his own voice, cold and clear and utterly devoid of humanity. Make him disappear again. For good this time. A collective gasp sucked the air from the plaza. The reporters, who had been there to document a triumph, turned as one, a flock of vultures sensing a kill. Cameras flashed, not in admiration, but in accusation. Croft's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Eleanor walked forward, her heels clicking on the stone with the finality of a judge's gavel. She didn't hurry. She let him stew in the silence, let every eye in the plaza burn into him. She took a microphone from a stunned reporter. For 10 years, her voice rang out, clear and amplified, Julian Croft built his career on the foundation of a lie. He didn't outcompete his rival, Liam Sullivan. He tried to murder him. She gestured to the main screen where the live feed now switched to the stock ticker for Croft Enterprises. The price was in a freefall, a waterfall of red. Another window opened, showing the grim faces of his own board of directors seated in an emergency session. As of 5 minutes ago, I completed a hostile takeover of Croft Enterprises. The board has voted unanimously to remove him. His assets are frozen. His legacy is erased. Croft stumbled backward, his carefully constructed world imploding in real time. You can't. This is slander, doctored evidence, he shrieked, his voice thin with panic. He took everything from me, he finally screamed, his composure shattering completely as he pointed a trembling finger at the ghost on the screen, an old photo of a smiling Liam. He had the talent, the ideas. He had you. It should have been mine. I deserved it. You deserved nothing, Eleanor said into the microphone, her voice dropping to a merciless whisper that was somehow audible to the entire world. You wanted his life, Julian. Now you can have what's left of it. As if on cue, 2 police detectives stepped onto the stage from the wings, their movements calm and deliberate. A small, empty box. No future, no hope. Just a memory of what you coveted and lost. Welcome to my world. She dropped the microphone and walked away, not looking back as they cuffed a screaming, broken Julian Croft. She didn't need to watch his world burn. She had lit the match herself, and the fire was absolute. The cacophony of sirens, shouting reporters, and Croft's pathetic denials faded behind her as she slipped into the back of her waiting car. The cold satisfaction she had anticipated, the righteous thrill of vengeance, was absent. All she felt was a vast, echoing emptiness. The war was over. The ghost had been avenged. But the man she had done it all for was sitting in a hospital waiting room, a stranger who would never understand. In the quiet, sterile room where Lily was now stable and sleeping peacefully, the victory felt like a distant, hollow echo. Daniel had watched the entire press conference on the room's small television. He stood frozen before the screen, his hand unconsciously tracing the crescent scar above his own brow as he watched the face of the man. Liam, he was supposed to be. He felt a profound and unsettling vertigo, as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. There was no anger, no relief, only a terrifying void where a life should have been. This stranger, Liam Sullivan, had been the target of a murder plot. His life had been stolen. And Daniel was the living proof of the crime, a ghost wearing a stranger's face. When Eleanor entered, the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beep of the monitor were the only sounds. Daniel didn't turn from the window. "So that's what happened," he said, his voice scraped raw. "That's why I'm like this." "Yes," she said softly, her own adrenaline from the confrontation fading into a deep, crushing ache. He finally turned to face her. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by something far more devastating, a deep, soul-level exhaustion. "You've been amazing. You saved my daughter. You brought that monster to justice." He took a step closer, his gaze searching her face. "But what now, Eleanor? Am I just a project to you? The final piece of evidence in your case? Are you looking at me, or are you just looking for him?" The question was a shard of glass in her heart because it was true. She had been so focused on avenging Liam that she hadn't truly seen Daniel. She had won her war, but in the process she had treated the man before her as a symbol, not a person. She started, but the words wouldn't come. There was no defense. She had been staring at a ghost, and in doing so had been completely blind to the living, breathing man in front of her. "Don't answer," he said, his voice weary, though not unkind. "I see it in your eyes. Every time you look at me, you're searching. Trying to find a flicker of him behind my face. It must be like looking at a portrait that's been painted over. You know what's underneath, but all you can see is the stranger on top." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound frustration. "I get it. But you have to understand. I'm not him. I can't be." That night, for the first time in 10 years, Eleanor allowed herself to break. She walked into the study they had designed together, the one she had kept sealed like a tomb. The air was stale, smelling of old paper, leather, and the faint, ghostly scent of the pipe tobacco Liam had smoked when he was deep in thought. She ran her hand over his drafting table, over a half-finished blueprint, for a solar-powered water purifier. A forgotten coffee mug, stained brown, sat exactly where he had left it. The woman who had dismantled a rival corporation without flinching now collapsed into his reading chair, the leather sighing under her weight. The grief she had channeled into steel and code and vengeance finally overwhelmed her. It wasn't the heroic grief for a man lost to the sea. It was a raw, ugly, agonizing grief for the husband who was alive but would never know her again. She wept for the stolen years, for the daughter he never met, for the man named Daniel who was now just as lost as she was. She wept until her throat was raw, mourning the ghost she had finally, truly been forced to bury. When Lily was discharged, Eleanor made her proposition, a job as the estate manager with a private guest house for him and Lily. "It's not charity," she said, forcing herself to meet his eyes, to see him, and not the shadow behind him. "And it's not a cage. The grounds have been neglected for a decade. They need someone who knows how to bring things back to life. And Lily deserves a garden to play in. A safe place." It was not an attempt to keep Liam close, but a genuine offer of a safe harbor for Daniel and his daughter. A way to start over, free from the shadow of the past. After a long silence, he accepted. Life settled into a strange new rhythm. Daniel, it turned out, had a preternatural gift for coaxing life from the earth. The long-dormant gardens bloomed under his quiet competence. Lily, a whirlwind of recovered joy, became the bridge between their two solitary worlds. She would drag Daniel by the hand to the main house, her small voice echoing in the vast halls. "Ellie, come see. Papa found a frog. He says it's a prince, but I don't want to kiss it." Slowly they began to talk. Not as a ghost and his widow, but as two people. He told her about Lily's mother, Maria, a kind woman who had died from a sudden illness, and the simple, hard life they had scraped together. She told him stories of Liam, not to trigger a memory, but to introduce him to a man he would never know. Like a character in a beloved book. She was sharing a part of herself, not trying to remake him. She learned to see the differences. Daniel's hands were rougher, his smile was quieter, his patience with Lily was a deep, calm well that Liam, with his restless energy, had never possessed. One afternoon, she found him in the old boathouse, his hand resting on the hull of a small sailboat Liam had been restoring. The air smelled of teak oil and dried salt. "My hands. They remember this," he said, his voice distant, his gaze lost somewhere over the water. "The feel of the wood, the way the rope wants to coil, but my head is just static, a wall of it." He closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Salt," he murmured, "and jasmine." It was her perfume, the one she'd always worn. A flicker of something crossed his face, not memory, but the sharp, agonizing pain of its absence. "It's like hearing a beautiful song through a concrete wall. I know it's there, I can feel the vibration of it in my bones, but I can't hear the notes. And the trying is driving me mad." He opened his eyes, and they were filled with a profound, heart-wrenching sadness. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry I'm not him." "Don't be," she said, her voice catching. She stepped forward and gently placed her hand over his on the cool, smooth wood. "Daniel, you have nothing to be sorry for. You survived hell. You raised a wonderful daughter. You are a good, kind man." She took a deep, shuddering breath, a final act of letting go of the phantom she had clutched for a decade. "Then let's stop listening for the song. Let's just sit in the quiet for a while. Together." A few weeks later, Lily came running into the study, her face beaming as she held up a crayon drawing. "I made our family." Eleanor took the paper. 3 figures stood before the grand house. A man with kind eyes labelled Papa. A woman with a small smile labelled Ellie. And in the middle, holding both their hands, was Lily. It wasn't a portrait of a family that was lost and broken. It was a portrait of a family being built. That evening, they sat on the porch, a comfortable silence settling between them as they watched the fireflies begin to dance in the twilight. "I'll never get the memories back, will I?" Daniel asked. It was a statement of fact, not despair. He had found a measure of peace with the emptiness. "No," Eleanor answered honestly, her gaze fixed on the blinking lights. "I don't think you will." He was quiet for a long time, then he turned to her. His eyes, once haunted, were now clear, focused entirely on her. That man, Liam, his story ended 10 years ago in the ocean. My story started then. It was a hard, lonely story for a long time. But it led me here, to Lily, and to you. He reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and sure, calloused from his work in the garden. I don't have his memories, Eleanor. I don't have his past. All I have is this moment, this porch, this life. And I have to tell you, I don't remember falling in love with you 10 years ago. But I am so completely, terrifyingly in love with the woman you are right now. Tears she didn't know she had left to cry welled in Eleanor's eyes. But these were not tears of grief. They were tears of quiet, overwhelming joy. She squeezed his hand. It was the hand of Daniel, strong, real, and present. I think, she whispered, her voice finally breaking free of a decade of ice, I'm in love with you too. The past was a scar, a part of them both, but it was no longer an open wound. Their story was not about reclaiming what was lost, but about the slow, patient, and breathtaking discovery of something new. Together, under a sky full of stars, they were no longer just survivors, they were a beginning.